world is in these things. So yeah, I invite all of you guys to reflect on this, to reflect on the concept of faith, because even though we are practicing Krishna consciousness, that's why we're here. Because we're existing in the material world, our faith might be in other things besides Krishna. I mean, because naturally that's how things are in the material world. So yeah, just reflect and consider on what things you put complete trust in and what things you have, what things you're dependent on in the material world. And try to maybe recognize that the only thing truly worthy of faith is the scriptural injunctions and the things written in the scriptures, and Krishna, the spiritual realm, because that's the only thing that is eternal, and the only thing that's really worthy of placing full dependence on. So this verse also goes into talking about the word sattva, and we hear the word sattva 3 times in the verse. And the word sattva, or faith, in the second paragraph, Prabhupada says it's very significant, and sattva, faith, always comes out of the works of goodness. So what does this mean? When I first read this, I was a little confused, because I'm thinking like, okay, well, we were just thinking how our faith in the material world is contaminated, and so how is it that it's always in goodness? Well, what it means is basically that since our intrinsic nature is sattvic, or pure, meaning that our original position is part and parcel to Krishna, then our faith is always coming out of these works of goodness. Our faith is also pure because it's part and parcel of Krishna. So our original faith, you can kind of think of it like a white light in your heart. It's always pure. It's always trying to get back to God. So it's trying to, our faith is originally supposed to be in God. But again, because we're in this material world, it's contaminated. So you can picture that light, even though its original position is like a bright white, very clear light, being in the material world, that light becomes distorted. So it can be maybe tinted red or blue or a different color if it's situated in the modes of passion or ignorance. And so we lose that clarity and that purity in our faith through associating with the material world. So our strong faith is supposed to be in the modes of goodness, but even material goodness is contaminated. So even the mode of sattva, of goodness in this world, it's always going to be leaning one way or another, like into passion or ignorance. Like it's never going to be completely pure. And the reason for this is because pure goodness is transcendental goodness, and that comes from associating with Krishna and with the spiritual world. So Prabhupada also talks in this verse about how faith is established according to the position of the heart, and how the contaminated modes of material nature expand to the heart. So that's a good imagery, I think, to reflect on, is the light in the heart and how that is affected by material nature. And he says in the end of the verse how the heart can be situated in goodness or passion or ignorance, and therefore your faith is situated in goodness or passion or ignorance. So wherever your heart is situated, that's where your faith is. So it's good to reflect on where your heart is, because that'll tell you where your faith is. So so based on where our heart's situated, and based on where we place our faith, that causes different types of faith to be in the world, and different types of religion come up because of this faith, and different types of worshiping comes up because of our faith. And so I think it'll be helpful to have like a clear definition of these words, because faith, religion, worship can kind of become confusing. So we already established that faith is whatever you put total and complete trust in. And so when you look at the definition of religion, there's a few different definitions. So religion is the belief in a supreme power. It's a particular system of faith or worship. So it's the system that we utilize to practice our faith. And it's also a pursuit to which someone ascribes supreme importance. So I think I like that last definition the most, because I think it's easier to reflect on in those terms. So religion is anything you make most important in your life. And then for worship can be defined as the feeling or expression of reverence and adoration for a deity. So by that definition, we can think, okay, what do I have the deepest expressions of reverence and adoration for in my life? What do I adore the most in my life? What do I treat as if it's a deity? So based on those definitions, we can think, okay, what is my religion? What is it that I do believe is most important in my life? And what do I worship? What do I adore the most in my life? And in Kali Yuga, in today's age, I think I see a lot of religions, like how Prabhupada is saying this, we come up with our own religions and our own types of worship based on our heart's position. So some examples of religions I see is like sports teams, like people will like worship their sports teams, like they adore that the most, or their job, people will worship and adore their job, and they'll make their job the most important thing in their life. Like everything in their life is situated around their job. Even their family life like suffers because of their job. Or their habits, so like using drugs and alcohol. I know plenty of people that the most important thing in their life is making sure that they always have their drugs with them, or that they always have some plans to go drinking. And so by these definitions, their religion is alcohol, or their their form of worship is intoxication. So so this is what I think Prabhupada is speaking on in this verse when he says that based on where your heart is situated, there's different religions and different types of faith in the world. So even though we have all these contaminated religions and different faiths that aren't based in purity, in pure transcendental goodness, in worshiping Krishna, we don't have to lose hope, because it is still possible to come back to this original nature through the mercy of Krishna, through the scientific process of Krishna consciousness. And so there's a way to come back to that through purifying our actions. So our heart, the light in our heart is contaminated. It's shining red or blue or black or some color that's not white. And so we can cleanse the color out of our heart by coming back to goodness and coming back to pure goodness. So yeah, there's a part in the verse, Prabhupada says, the real principle of religious faith is situated in the mode of pure goodness, but because the heart is tainted, we find different types of religious principles. So I really like the word nirguna. So nirguna means, it can mean like without entanglement, because like the gunas, another way to think of the gunas is like ropes, like they're entangling us in Maya. And to be nirguna is to not be entangled. So it's important to note too that even if we're trying to be in goodness without Krishna, like you might have a faith that's like oh, like I care about my family and like that's good, and but it's not completely purified without Krishna. So that's why Krishna is so important, because you can't have the pure goodness, you can't have the light that's not contaminated in any way without having Krishna. Because yeah, anything that, any type of faith that's based in the material, it's not in pure goodness. It's subjected to contamination by these material modes. So yeah, and the only way that we can really understand Krishna is through purified goodness, which is transcendental. So we have goodness on the material plane, but pure goodness, purified goodness is spiritual in that it's transcendental, in that it's focused on Krishna. And then Prabhupada says in the verse, the only way out of contamination or Maya without fear is Krishna consciousness, and this guarantees elevation to the perfectional stage. So basically, if you remain situated in the material and you remain entangled in Maya, it's guaranteed that you're going to continue to be guided by the modes of material nature and stay in the material plane. But if you stay situated in Krishna consciousness, then purification will naturally occur because you'll be spiritualizing your activities. And so you'll be able to elevate your faith from material contamination to being spiritually purified. So basically our heart is moving from being based in the material to being in Krishna consciousness through the purification process of practicing Krishna consciousness, through chanting, through reading the scriptures, and through making Krishna our source, our center, focal point of religion and faith and worship. Because like I said earlier, Krishna is really the only thing worthy of worship. He is the only thing worthy of worship, because he's the only thing that's absolute and eternal, because everything in the material is volatile. And so yeah, of course you would want to place your faith and complete trust in Krishna, the one thing that is eternal and absolute. So I wanted to read something from The Science of Self-Realization, because I've been reading this book, and this is what inspired me wanting to pick this verse, because it really solidifies like why Krishna consciousness, like why do we pursue Krishna consciousness and not some other religion that's been fabricated in the material world. So I'll be reading from page 118, which is the chapter titled Understanding Krishna and Christ. And so this is a conversation that's happening between Srila Prabhupada and Father Emmanuel John Clausen, and I believe they're in Germany. Yeah. And so they're having a conversation about the similarities between Krishna and Christ. And so Father Emmanuel asks a question. He says, we Christians also preach love of God, and we try to realize love of God and render service to him with all our heart and all our soul. Now, what is the difference between your movement and ours? Why do you send your disciples to the Western countries to preach love of God when the gospel of Jesus Christ is propounding the same message? And Srila Prabhupada simply says, the problem is that Christians do not follow the commandments of God. Do you agree? And Father Emmanuel says, yes, to a large extent, I do agree. And Prabhupada says, then what is the meaning of the Christian's love for God? If you do not follow the orders of God, then where is your love? Therefore, we have come to teach what it means to love God. If you love him, you cannot be disobedient to his orders. And if you're disobedient, your love is not true. All over the world, people love not God, but their dogs. The Krishna consciousness movement is therefore necessary to teach people how to revive their forgotten love for God. Not only the Christians, but also the Hindus, the Muhammadans, and all other are guilty. They have rubber stamped themselves Christian, Hindu, Muhammadan, and they do not obey God. That is the problem. And so I think that this conversation kind of reflects what this verse is stating, and that the whole purpose of Krishna consciousness is for us to revitalize our love of God, because in the material world, we're not living out of love of God. We're living out of love of money, love of drugs, love of sex, love of our dogs, love of everything that is volatile and material and not transcendental. And so that's the purpose of Krishna consciousness. And I think it's really interesting how he speaks about how the problem is that Christians do not follow the commandments of God. And not even just Christians, but you could say this about, I would say, basically every religion that's been, concocted in the material world. Not that those religions aren't based off of scripture, obviously they are. However, because we're contaminated by material nature, we see that these religions based in scriptures have been skewed and disoriented to fit certain agendas in the material world. And so this leads people to think that they can just follow a faith or religion that fits their own needs, that isn't actually based on God's commandments. And we see this even with the commandments in Christianity. So thou shalt not kill is a perfect example. Like, I think basically every Christian I know eats meat, and that's a direct violation of a commandment of God. They're completely going against God. Um, and so, what, like, you can say, yeah, I love God, but like, do you really? How much do you really love God if you're not following His orders and like His guidance that He's giving you? Um, Same thing with thou shalt not place any false gods before me. And it's interesting because like my family is Christian, and they'll try to tell me that like by worshiping Krishna, it's like demonic, or like it's like putting a false god or a false deity before God. But I think this commandment is misinterpreted, because I think what it's really speaking to when it says false gods is, like we just talked about in this verse, is anything that you worship before God, anything that you make more important than God in your life. And we're all guilty of this by putting things like our jobs or drugs or money before God. And so that's what the commandment's really speaking about. So yeah, that's why Krishna consciousness is the superior path, because it's teaching us how to revitalize that original love of God that's in all of our hearts. It's teaching us how to cleanse that light that's been, tainted a different color, that's not pure anymore. And yeah, I think a good analogy, an analogy I gave to my mom, because I read this. I'm visiting home for the holidays, so I think this is why I've been thinking a lot about faith, and trying to like put it into terms that is like easy for my family to understand. And so she's my mom, so I like kind of compared it to my relationship with her. And I said, like, Mom, you're never gonna stop loving me. Like, just like Krishna's never gonna stop loving his children. Like, a parent's love for their child is eternal. It's just naturally that way. But when I didn't follow the rules growing up, when I was a teenager and I snuck out of the house, or I would like talk back to my mom, it was more difficult for her to like, have compassion for me, because I was not doing what she said. And like, she knows what's best for me, just like Krishna knows what's best for us. In the scriptures, it tells us what is best for us. Yeah, we want to like make up our own rules and do our own thing, which is fine. However, it's going to like really hurt our relationship with Krishna, just like it hurts our relationship with our parents when we go against their wishes. So when you are able to kind of have that view on it, and realize like, okay, Krishna just wants what's best for me, just like my parents wants what's best for me. And when we're kids, we might not always understand the rules, and we might not always understand where they're coming from, or like why that's what's best for us, and we might not always agree with it. Ultimately, when we follow the rules, everything's better for us in life. And it's the same way with Krishna consciousness. When we follow the scriptures, we were able to cleanse ourselves and elevate ourselves to the spiritual realm, and we just have a better time in this life when we do that. So there's also a point in this book, The Science of Self-Realization, where Prabhupada talks about, because Father Emmanuel kind of argues back, well, like, okay, we might not follow all of the commandments, but the most important part is that we love God. But Prabhupada says, like, what use is that? Because he uses the analogy of a chicken, and how the chicken lays eggs. And a farmer might think like, oh, I love the eggs, but like the front part of the chicken, the beak, is really expensive to feed, so I'll just cut the chicken's head off and it'll still lay eggs for me. And it's like, no, like, you can't just cut the parts of the scriptures out that you don't like and expect the same results. Like, it just doesn't work that way. So as much as it might be challenging, or it might be difficult for us to, I'm sorry, let me just let my dog out because she's being very loud. But yeah, as much as it might be challenging for us to follow the scriptures, it's very important we follow all of the scriptures exactly as they're given if we want to receive those results of purifying ourselves and purifying our faith, purifying our heart, and elevating our faith to be situated in pure goodness. So yes, that is my discussion today. I know I kind of am ending a little early, but I wanted to open it up for conversation or questions because I just think this is a really fascinating verse that's really everybody kind of has their own perspective on this. So if anyone has any questions or comments, I openly invite them at this time.
Thank you, Bhakti and Amanda. It's so clear. Your explanation is so clear. About faith, and I love the way you like the explanation of the commandment. I think it encapsulates your entire presentation. Like, yeah, it's like where do we put our faith, and then our action are going to reveal our faith. So even within Krishna consciousness, we have a path, and it's a clear path. It's very delineated by the acharyas, by Srila Prabhupada, and we know what to do basically. And at the same time, our action may reveal that we are lacking faith somehow. Like I'm still holding down to like Draupadi. She was in front of all those men, and when Shakuni came and he tried to disrobe her in front of a big assembly, the first thing she did is like to hold on to her sari. So like that, and often I see myself like hold on to my sari. And then after what she did, she raised one hand. And then I can see like, yeah, I turn to God, but there is another part of me that want to hold on to my sari because my face is still like I can hold on and maybe I will not be disrupted. Yeah. And then, of course, Draupadi, she's a pure devotee. So when she does fully surrender, and so even like Srila Prabhupada says, even on a royal path, there is such a thing as accident. And so, I'm looking at, okay, so there is Krishna consciousness, there is a path, there is a process, there is a lineage, and then there is what I do, and also what may be done to the path that is bringing tamas or raja or material goodness in it. And I would like to invite you to speak about that.
Thank you, Mother Malini. Yeah, I love that that pastime. That was one of the when I came to Krishna consciousness, I think that was the very first story I ever heard. And I thought I thought like, wow, that's such a great analogy for fully surrendering in life. And yeah, I like how you worded that. Like, how are we holding on to our sari? Like, in what ways are we still holding on to the illusion of control and holding on and not fully surrendering to the process of having complete faith in Krishna? And yeah, and even in Krishna consciousness, like, yeah, we're on the path to becoming pure devotees, but we're still, even in Krishna consciousness, like we still are living in the material world. And this is something I struggle with a lot. It's like, okay, I'm trying to be Krishna conscious, but like there's still all of this material stuff happening around me, and like I still, need to live in Kali Yuga and like make money and like associate with people in the world. So because he talks about it in this verse too, is like wherever your heart is situated, that's where who you associate with. And so like, yeah, I still have people I associate with that are situated in Rajas and Tamas. And so yeah, like even though we're on this path, it's not, that doesn't mean, just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy. That's something that I've been really reflecting on a lot too. Is like, yeah, the path is here. It's simple, like read the scriptures, chant the holy name. And at the same time, like even though it's simple, it's hard at times to always remain situated in that transcendental pure goodness. And I might have good intentions in my heart, but because I'm in the material, it's always going to be contaminated one way or the other. And yeah, I think it's a good thing to think about, because it can be kind of easy to think like, oh, I'm in Krishna consciousness, so I'm good, like I'm transcendental and everything, like I'm not contaminated. And I think it's important to remain humble and to continue to reflect on, okay, well, how are ways that I am holding on to my sorrow? How are ways that I could surrender deeper? Something that one of my good devotee friends shared with me is, you could always surrender more. Like there's no end to the surrendering process. Like you might think, okay, I've surrendered, but now like check, like what are you still holding on to in your life, like that you're trying to remain some sense of control, or you don't have complete faith in Krishna. And again, like it's easier said than done. Like even though it's simple and we know the path and what to do, it doesn't mean it's always easy to do. So yeah, thank you for that, introducing that analogy and that pastime. I think somebody else had raised their hand too.
Kim raised her hand.
Okay. Kim, are you there? Did you have something to share?
Oh, sorry. My sound keeps going in and out. Anyway, yeah, thank you for the class. The only thing, well, the other day I was having a conversation with a very sincere Catholic, and she was afraid that Krishna consciousness, we weren't being told that the most important thing is to love God. And I was trying to say, yeah, that is really the most important thing that we're taught all the time, and she's having a hard time with that. But then we got into the loving God thing, and that's always thrown me really hard. And I guess I just wanted to hear anybody else talk about it. But like for me, and you're brought up being taught you need to love God with your whole heart, your whole soul, and your whole mind. And I always knew deep down that I don't love God. I have a desire to love God, but I know I don't love God, because if I heard God was dead, I would be scared. I would think, oh my goodness, what's going to happen to me? But I know it wouldn't be the same emotion as when my dog dies. When my dog dies, I'm hysterical, crying. So I don't know. It's such an incredibly lofty, it's like, it's kind of said like in a just form, like just love God with your whole heart, your whole soul, and your whole mind. And yet to me, there's like, I can't imagine anything harder. So then I go back to, there's that scripture in the Bhagavad Gita that says, I don't know how to quote it, but only one out of like 1 million people really are ready to go back to God. And I guess they're the ones who love God with their whole heart, the whole soul, and whole mind. But it just always throws me when it's kind of said in a way like, oh, that's all you have to do, when it's so incredibly hard, So I just wondered if there's more comments on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that point up. Yeah, I mean, going back to like, just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy. Like, yeah, it is hard to love God, because like there's a lot we don't understand God. Like it's really hard to understand God. Like I don't think it's even really possible to fully it's not possible to fully understand God. And there's a lot of things that God does that, will make us angry or confused or hurt. Like and also I wanted to share a story, because my mom actually brought this up when I was talking to her last night. She said, because my grandma is very, very heavily Catholic too. And she almost uses her faith as like spiritual bypassing to like not be kind to her family at all, because she's just like, oh, I'm loving God like so hard and so much. And so it's like, it causes this like dissonance where it's like, okay, you love God, but like you're a bad person. Like it's really confusing. And yeah, so I mean, I think that's a great point, because like loving God it's not always easy to do. And it's not like a just love God thing. Like it's a process. Like Krishna, like the process of Krishna consciousness is to learn how to love God so that God reveals himself to us. And it's not always easy, but it's a practice, just like anything. It's something we practice, and gradually it becomes more natural and more like, I don't want to say easier, but like it becomes like something that I guess brings more clarity and peace like the more you do it. but it's not something that's like just going to happen overnight. And I kind of think about like when I was a kid, like I didn't always love my parents because I was like mad at them sometimes, or like I was like, oh, you don't know like anything about me, and like so yeah, that's kind of like my relationship with God is like, I guess it's kind of like a love-hate relationship where it's like I want to love you, but like sometimes I hate you, and sometimes I'm really angry at you, and sometimes it's just not clear to me what's going on. So but yeah, it's a practice and it's a process. So it's not something that happens as easily as like loving your cuddly dog that, you know, just wants to give you kisses. Like I wish God was like that, but he's not. So yeah, so thanks for bringing that point up. It's simple, but it's not easy for sure.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share?
Yes. Are you able to hear me from here?
I think if you yell very loudly, I can hear you, but otherwise, no, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll get closer.
Thank you, dear Govinda.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for your class and presentation. And yeah, I appreciate. Well, first, I appreciate your choice of this verse because sometimes we encounter, like like are you a person? Are you a person of faith or a person of reason? And then so like this verse in your presentation, it establishes like no, that the question is not founded on reality because everyone is a person of faith, right? Because no, I'm a person. No, everyone's a person of faith, and as you said, like, and our actions reveal our faith. I can speak about my faith is in Krishna, whatever, but if we look at my actions, that will reveal where, to the extent my faith is in Krishna or something else. So if someone is like, yeah, well, I drive to work every day for an hour, and then I work this job even though I don't like it, and I do that 60 hours a week. Well, that's where we spend our time. We must have faith. That's going to bring me a sense of happiness, security, a sense of fulfillment. Or as you said, if someone is spending time with the sports team or spending time on this political website, well, that's where my faith is. Where we spend our time, that reveals our faith. So that's an important point, and because sometimes those who are endeavoring to practice Krishna consciousness, I've seen they can get intimidated. It's like, there's persons of reason, but we're persons of no. So then, I can say that in my process over more 40 some years, for sure, that the most reasonable place to place my faith is Bhagavad Gita, is the guidance of Srila Prabhupada. And so I appreciated the several points in your class, and yeah, you indicated your exchange with your mother or family members, and the idea of like, yeah, there's that commandment in the Bible, the part of the 10 Commandments, to not worship idols. And a point we make sometimes, and we have someone here for whom Hebrew is practically his mother language, so he would know better than me. But in that commandment where it says to not worship idols, the language that God uses in speaking to Moses and the people of Israel, he uses the term al panai. And so al is like a negation, and panai means face. So that commandment is often used, whether it's by Judaism or branches of Christianity, to use to try to say that don't worship idols. God has no form. But what God is saying there, he's saying, I have a face, and worship that face, and don't worship any other. Don't worship the golden calf. Don't worship money. Etc. etc. So he's specifically saying, yes, but panim. He says, yes, I have a face. Worship my form. Worship my name. Worship my face, and don't worship anything that's not truly God. So thanks again for your class. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Gajendra. Yeah, this chapter of the Science of Self-Realization, this whole, there's like a whole section about the comparing Krishna consciousness to Christianity. And yeah, I thought it was really fascinating. Just the point that Prabhupada made about, are we following the commandments of God? Because yeah, people will kind of misinterpret it in their own way. Even with the thou shalt not kill commandment, Father Emmanuel is trying to argue like, well, we Christians don't believe animals have souls, so we can kill animals and eat them. And Prabhupada's like, was Jesus not smart enough to use the right word? Like he would say, thou shalt not murder. And so that's just an example of how we misinterpret and twist things because of our contamination to fit our own agenda, to fit our own made up concocted religions that are not factually based in scripture. So yeah, same thing with the deity, or thou shalt not worship false gods before me. Like yeah, it's misviewed and misinterpreted. So thanks for that point. Hare Krishna.
Chat here.
There's a
Yeah,
Anandini has a comment to make.
She was saying she wasn't here. Yeah, Anandini has her hand up.
Okay. Hare Krishna. You're still on mute, so we can't hear you right now.
Hare Krishna. Do you hear me now? Yes.
Yes,
Thank you, Amanda, for your presentation. It was really like hard not to listen. I felt very captured by your way of speaking. And yeah, I just have a few reflections. And one is that, so faith seems so essential, like we take our decisions based on our faith, and our faith is formed by our association. And so I was just contemplating on, it seems like very effective if I want to like channel my life towards more and more service to Krishna, to have my faith in the right place. So how do I create that? How do I take care of that? I was thinking about that. And I find it interesting, this connection to concepts. Like Srila Prabhupada speaks about how we have so many concepts of life, conceptions of life and impressions. And yeah, recently I was like, I agree with this. It's simple but not easy, and it sounds so easy. Just love God with all your heart, with your mind and with your soul. I want to do that. How to do that? And then how yeah, another thing I recently heard from Srila Prabhupada is how his mercy, Krishna's mercy, it's like showering on us all the time, like the sun. It just shines, and it doesn't say, oh no, here's this person, I will not give him any sun rays. The sun rays go everywhere. So the same with Krishna's mercy, it just goes everywhere, and it's for us to be prepared and open to receive this mercy. So yeah, I was just wondering how this all plays together, and is it really like made difficult for us to love God and to see God everywhere, or do we make it difficult? I don't know if it's making any sense what I'm sharing.
Yeah, I appreciate your reflections and your questions. I think in the material nature, yeah, we make it hard to love God because we're in this contaminated material realm. So we think like we're living in a way. Okay, so God's mercy is not always easy for us to understand and to interpret, because we're living in this duality in this material world where things appear good and bad. So Krishna's mercy might seem like not really great in the material world. Like it might be something really tragic and awful, but that's his mercy raining down on us all the time, is us, losing people we love, losing our jobs. Like it's things that seem bad. Like those are actually Krishna's mercy. We just we're not able to see it and understand it because we're living in this illusion and this contamination. So it's not clear. And speaking to your point, where is it hard to love God? Like, did he make it that way? We make it that way ourselves, I think, because we're in this position in this material world because of God's mercy, because we have this desire in our heart to be the controller and to be God. And so it's hard for us to love God because we want to be God. And that's why we're here, because we want to take control and be the controller and be the enjoyer, when really that's Krishna's position. And so I think I don't know if that really helps like speak to your reflections or your questions, but that's kind of like my understanding of it, is like, okay, I'm here because I have this desire to be manifested in the material so that I can play my own illusion as Amanda, as God. And Krishna's giving me this experience because of his mercy, and he wants me to like be God Amanda for a lifetime. And at the same time, like it's like that analogy with the two birds on the tree, like where I'm like enjoying and being the controller and everything, and he's still here, like waiting for me to turn to him and to love him. But it's hard for me to do that. It's really hard for me to do that because like I'm still living in my own universe, in my own world, basically. So I think that's kind of why it's challenging, because it's hard for us to give up. Like, it's hard for us to let go of our sorry and say like, oh, I don't want to be the controller anymore. I don't want to, like, I want to put my whole faith in Krishna, because we're here for the whole purpose of being the controller and being our own God in our own life, in a sense. So I don't know if that speaks to your point at all, but that's what came to mind for me. So
Thank you. Yes, it does speak to my heart, emotions and some pain, because it just comes down to the same thing again and again. I want to control, and I want my concepts to be right, and like if God loves me, that's how it looks like, and that's my way and not his way. So yeah, it's like just the same thing. So thank you.
yeah, of course. Yeah, it's not easy, but but yeah. Okay, Gajendra? Sorry if I said your name wrong, but
Gajendra, thank you. I'm sorry I missed most of the class. I had something going on, but checked in late. What you and Nandini were just discussing, I kind of feel like, well, it's like completely true. Like, okay, maybe I want to be the controller, and Krishna is the controller. I still feel like, well, that's just sort of the setup of the issue of sort of conflict between myself and Krishna. And if I just sort of stay, well, I want to be the controller, but I'm not the controller, Krishna's the controller, I could just sort of sit in a place of resentment with that truth. And so I'm just thinking, we have to come to the understanding that's positive, like focusing on the positive, like, but what I really get to have, because I don't really want to be the controller, it's not who I am, and be a major burden. I can't even control successfully a few square feet around me, much less all the worlds, but that I get to cooperate with Krishna. Like, I don't want to control. I want to cooperate. I positively understand. I positively have the knowledge of what it would mean to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead with love and devotion. And if I focus on that, I don't even have time to think about the fact that, oh, I'm not the controller. It's so replaced with something positive and desirable.
yeah, thank you so much for that comment. Because it really comes down to our mindset, right? Like, get to or have to. Like, you can think like, oh, I have to be controlled by Krishna. Like, I don't get to be the controller.
Yeah.
Like, it sucks. Or we can look at it like, wow, I get to be like, I get to realize my position. I get to be subordinate to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and I get to work with Krishna. Like, I don't have to work against him and try to be the ultimate control of my life. I get to work with him and like appreciate him for his position in my life. So yeah, it really comes down to that mindset. And yeah, thank you so much for that point, because
Thank you. Thank you. I feel my comment was understood. Thank you very much.
Yeah, for sure. Does anyone else have any comments to share?
Thank you, Amanda. I was thinking about the conversation with Anandini and loving God with all your might, and sometimes this focus sounds to lead to cheap spiritual life. Oh, I love God. Like people will say, I love God. I, I I don't make any change in my life. I live in ways that reflect a faith that's somewhere else than in God. But as long as I say I love God, and it's about my heart, and I'm in loving with God, and as Anandini was saying, and also Kim, it sounds like very lofty of a goal, and so to bring it, like it seems like to bring it um, as a center point seems to lead to a cheap spirituality, like very cheap spirituality. And it seems that most of the process of Krishna consciousness is to bring us, and Christianity too, to bring us to like two stages. And the first stage is before love is respect. How can there be love if there is no respect? So in Christianity, it used to be that people were, learn or come to a place of fearing God. And of course, it's been misused by the mode of passion and ignorance by human being wanted power. But at the same time, like it's a step of realization that may be more advanced than, oh, I love God, like that. Like, wow, yeah, God is omnipotent, omniscient. He knows everything. He can do anything. And I'm going to, start like a child. Like, we don't want the child to be terrorized by the parents. And at the same time, there is such a protection. Mother Yashoda, she had that debate with her. She see like, okay, the child needs to listen to me. So some level of fear is useful for parenting, but too much level of fear, then it spoils the relationship between the child and the parents. So I'm just reflecting on the fact that the loving God part is often used in a cheap way, and to come to a place, okay, let me to come to a place of accepting that God is omnipotent, that is the one in charge. I don't even know how food is digested in my stomach, like Gajendra was saying, like I don't have control over anything that's happening in my life. And to come to that place of surrender and accepting there is a bigger force than me, and it may not be love yet in that bigger force. However, it could be conducive for a higher level of respect and surrender and acceptance.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I agree. Just saying to love God, yeah, that is a cheap bypass, like, because it's, yeah, love is, yeah, not something that you could just do overnight. And so, and I like that you said the respect thing and the surrender thing. So rather than saying like, oh, just love God, you can say, okay, why don't you just first start on accepting God as omnipotent, like just accept that fact. And then once you can accept that, respect God, like respect God's position and respect the scriptures that he's given us. And then once you have been able to respect, you can surrender to that, and then you can start to learn to love God. So it's like a process. It's not like, oh, you love God, that's it. Like it's something that you have to practice every day. I mean, no different than loving anybody. Like you can't love anybody without respecting them and surrendering to their position in your life. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. Anandini, you have another comment? Oh, you're still on mute.
Yes, yes. And my comment is about love. I was thinking about that before, and recently I've been like rechecking my understanding of love. And I thought, some time ago, okay, now I know what love is. But I don't really know, like if you, as you were sharing, like Krishna's mercy doesn't always look nice to us, or like it's not warm and fuzzy and harmonious from my point of view, but it's love. And so what does love actually mean? And we're reading in Nectar of Devotion, love in different modes, love for God in different modes, love in anger, love in resentment, love in also, yeah, what does love actually mean? Yeah. Maybe you have something to say about that.
Yeah, that's a big question. What does love mean? I think I should do some reflecting like how you've been doing, because yeah, it's hard for me to say like what love means, because yeah, like we were talking about, love doesn't always mean like warm and fuzzy hearts and hugs and kisses. Like love sometimes really hurts, and love sometimes doesn't appear pleasant to our dualistic perspective. So but I think like what Mother Malani just shared, love ultimately comes down to respect and acceptance and surrender. So yeah, I wish I could say more, but I don't feel like I'm a love expert, not by any means. So if anyone else has anything to share.
All right, Krishna, I appreciate the discussion. Well, in the discussion, Mother Malini's comment, you're expressing Bhakti okay, we can think of love as a feeling and love as a verb. Love is a feeling and love is a verb. And so, and as far as like feelings of love, that's the science of that is described in places like Nectar of Devotion, Bhava, Prema, and like that. And then I'm reminded there was one of Prabhupada's servants, Prabhupada's personal servants at one time, and like they arrived at an airport, and there was this very wild, enthusiastic airport scene of the devotees just wild in enthusiasm and bowing down to Prabhupada, this and that, and then they got to the temple, and they got to Prabhupada's room, and his personal servant was unpacking his things and this and that. And the personal servant shared very vulnerably. He said, Prabhupada, these devotees, and they're dancing ecstatically, and they're crying, and they have such love for you. And the servant said, I don't feel that love for you. So Prabhupada said, do you like to pack my bags and to carry things? And the servant said, oh yes, yes. Do you like to prepare my prasadam? And the servant said, oh yes, I'm so grateful for that. And Prabhupada asked a few practical things. And the servant said, oh yes, I appreciate that so much. And Prabhupada said, he said, that is love. So there's the feeling, which isn't to be minimized, but more love as a verb. And related to some of this conversation, I think I love God. Or yeah, related to some of what you shared with your example with your parents. Like, okay, because sometimes people will say like whatever I do, God loves me. Like you said, like whatever you do, your parents love you, and there are some things you can do where your mom will love you more, right? Okay. So for sure, whatever we do, Krishna still loves us. That's not the question. The question is, what am I doing to show that I'm serious about cultivating my love for Krishna? And like, okay, and because Krishna will always love us, but there's some things we can do where we endear ourselves. So like, to what extent are we following the pure devotee, our current link to the Parampara? Are we following Srila Prabhupada? by doing things like this, discussing Bhagavad Gita as it is. Okay, this is showing whatever feeling we have, but that we're spending time this way, this is showing at least we want to cultivate love, and it's not just I love God. But what are we doing in terms of love as a verb? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, dear Govinda. Gajendra, did you have a comment?
Yes, just a quick comment. I appreciate it. Well, it started sort of with the ending's question, sort of, what does love mean? And then dear Govinda just spoke, and he mentioned the nectar of devotion. And I think the way I look at it is, I mean, in turn, like, what does love mean, or how one finds love meaningful? That's ultimately a very, 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 very personal thing. What one finds meaningful, or what Krishna might find meaningful in relation to you. But what can be said is, like in the nectar of devotion, the expressions of love can, I think, be infinitely flavored and nuanced, in great variety. But love itself has certain characteristics, and I think those characteristics of pure love or pure service, bringing what dear Govinda brought back into it, that can be studied, and begin to be comprehended intellectually, but ultimately it's something that's experienced and expressed in ways that are personally meaningful. That's how I see it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I like your point that there's infinite flavors. And when I think of love as a verb, I think the easiest example we can think of is like love for a partner. And like when you have a crush on somebody, or like you want to be with somebody, you think about them all the time. You want to do anything to make them happy. You want to know everything about them, like they're the most important person in your life. So it's like, okay, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite food? Like all of these things. And so we can think of Krishna in that way. I mean, there's different ways to think of Krishna than just, in that way, because there's, I think, I don't know them, but there's like 9 ways to have a relation, or 6, I don't know. I'm not an expert in this, but there's different relationships we could have with Krishna. We know that. But for me personally, it is easiest for me to relate to Krishna in the way of loving him, like how I would love a partner, because yeah, that's how I think that's how it's natural to express love, is to spend your time thinking about them and doing everything to make them happy. So that's what love means to me. So thanks for sharing. So it's 9:15. I don't know if anyone else has any comments, but I am feeling quite complete with this discussion. So thank you all for attending and for sharing, and have a great day. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Bhagavad Gita ki jai.
Bye.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Bhaktin Amanda.
Hare Krishna.